Welcome to T+T Doubleshot, where we have Trent, the architectural photographer, and Tim,
the retoucher,
the
and
retoucher, and studio manager, and marketer, and social media presenter.
Retoucher first.
Retoucher, and video presentation personality.
Yeah. Engaging personality.
Engaging both of us. Woo! Today, or now, it's never today when you're on the internet.
Right.
Really?
Yeah, that's why you can't reference like any sort of like current weather. Or
you can't
events.
say tune
it's
in.
It's nice out when they're watching.
Right.
Know.
It's always nice out in Biddeford.
Right.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, we could say it's cold out because that's going to be a while. This will come out in the new year and it'll still be cold. So It's pretty cold out.
Currently, it's cold out, and you're tuning in. You've clicked on the very exciting second installment of our presentation on Elliott Architects' house
Wharf
on
house.
A wharf.
Yeah.
Wharf house.
Yep.
Very exciting stuff.
Yeah.
House on a wharf.
That's what they call it.
On a wharf. Okay. Okay, so interior image from this project, one of the more juicy ones from the shoot. This one was difficult to shoot and post-produce, I think.
Yeah.
Mostly because of the extreme lighting conditions. So the issue, so to start out with composition, why we chose this composition and where. The first mistake on my part I'm seeing is like where the far edge of the ottoman coffee table almost intersects with the rug. But I think it's more prominent in the foreground that if you had pulled it forward, it would have gotten lost in the corner of the chair. So there's always a compromise with things that you have to kind of play with, work around with, and accept. And sometimes you just miss stuff and mess up.
It's like when we look over, there's always a line that intersects in the wrong spot.
Right, like
Not
the back spot, of this chair being that close to the vertical part of the porch construction. I mean, I should have maybe moved that a little left, and I should have maybe just a tiny bit either raised the camera up or moved this ottoman type thing closer to camera. But this whole thing was really hard as far as reflective surfaces on the ottoman deal here. And then the light balance between highlight and shadow is just very extreme here. So to shoot it, to light it, and then to post-produce this is hard. So you have this one point kind of looking essentially at this chair and the view beyond. We had another shot looking from the back of the couch out to the front. This one we chose to also do this way just because it's just a good shot. So.
Yeah, in terms of like post-production on those two shots, they're equally difficult because it's still the same problem, right? The extreme highlights and the deeper shadows. So from that vantage, it's go for it. Sorry.
Yeah. So the difficulty with shooting this was mostly picking the height, staying on the 1 point perspective, and what do you arrange that whole 1 point on? And we roughly went with the center of this window that we're looking out. Excuse me. And you could center up on this, let's see, what do you call that on the ceiling? That it's a coffered, not a coffered ceiling, but essentially beam up there. We could have centered ourselves completely on that, but I think we just would have been a little too far that way and just wouldn't have felt right. And we could have gone lower, but then this comes up above this water line, and I think we wanted to just get as much water above the railing and the land ending above the railing while seeing water between land and railing and then water below railing. So a lot of stuff going on that you just kind of have to compensate and find the happy medium. And then lighting-wise, I think we bracketed this and also did lighting off the ceiling.
I don't think we did lighting on this one.
Really?
No.
I really thought we would have.
We did. Maybe in the other one. Maybe we might have.
Yeah.
But
okay.
We did some cheating.
Definitely. We always do cheating.
I think cheating.
Oh, cheating.
We always cheat. I think maybe because I was there, I was like, let's just do cheating because that bringing that in to me is a little easier than lighting sometimes. So
yeah,
it might have been my influence as to.
It's kind of like you're using what's already there. You're able to turn it down a little bit if you use the right type of sheeting and everything. Now, an interesting point is that when you come on site, we shoot a little bit different because of what you have to do in post. But we only really get to do that when we don't have a huge backlog of post-production, which we usually do have from about June through December.
So if we could just shoot one project a month that I go on and then post.
Right. But for me, the hard thing was always you go and shoot all day. And at the end of that, you're just wrecked. And then you have to think, oh no, now I have to face all this stuff I did shortcuts on before. Now I just get to hand,
well, it's like being on site is easier in post-production because in terms of like, I remember the color of the wall, or I remember things that I can.
So actually being there makes post-production a lot easier for you.
Not a lot, but easier. Yeah. It's, I don't have to guess on some things. And
what's the feeling difference between just getting a project and like, oh, look where they were shooting compared to like, no, I've been there and now I'm post-producing it?
In terms of like the actual product, like the retouching. Well, sometimes like a client will send like, paint samples or fabric samples or something that I need to match. But if I'm there, I can generally just get pretty close to it just from memory and seeing things and making that connection. How's
your emotional like in depth, like ability to really be excited about doing the post-production when you've already been there and gone through the shoot compared to when you've never been at the shoot?
That's interesting. Let me think about that.
Because for me, as a photographer, when I used to do my own post-production, I did not like that.
Yeah, I think like if I get a project that I wasn't at, I'm kind of like, oh, wow, that's cool. Like that's an interesting space. Like I just witnessing it for the first time, even though it's like a 2D image is I don't know. There's a different like wonder about it. Like if I'm there and experiencing it, it's, and then I come back to it later. It's like, well, I've been there, and it's like that.
It's like I'd imagine.
I don't know if that makes it easier. It just makes my initial like reaction is probably what's different about it.
Right. I would imagine when you sit down to the project, if you've already been on the shoot, the first thing you think is like, all right, I remember these problems.
Right. Yeah.
Rather than, ooh, wow.
Right.
You know?
Well, in the back of my mind too, while I'm there, I'm like, this one's going to be difficult when I get back.
Right.
That one will be easy. So when you just hand me a project that I haven't been to, it's like I have no preconceived like conception or notions of what I'm expecting. Right. So
I remember the end of this sofa and that pillow being difficult because you could zoom in and it looked okay over here to just catch a bit of that, but having something this long not terminate can feel a little disorienting.
You mean like it just goes off frame? Like you don't get the end of the couch?
Yeah, as a sofa, it feels weird. If it's a window, I love it. Because then it's
so you're saying
like,
you like it like this?
I like it like this to have like you see the termination of the end of the sofa.
It feels something feels like unfinished or something if it was just the sofa that went off frame. Like where's that going?
But I wouldn't want to see the entire end of the sofa because then you get the big forehead kind of hitting you. This is just implied. Enough. I like that.
I think I remember the two chairs were the things that we were like kind of moving a lot.
Yeah, that too.
They're kind of big, and so just
like as far as camera placement, I don't think we were moving the sofa much. But once we had that established, we were playing around with the chairs a lot. Right. Then it was like, where do we put this in relation to the sofa? Is it too far away from the sofa and that doesn't feel right, or is it more of a thing between the chairs?
Right.
So, but yeah, we did essentially a bracket.
I think the bracket in that case. Hey, there's me.
Hey, look at that. Proof.
We were just sheeting for the ottoman there.
Yeah.
Because that's the shiny bit that we were.
Like if you look at that, it's just a little too, so if you pull it in. And then we did doors open and close so we could take out layers of glass. Because if you look at this, like this is open, but it's really dark here and it gets usually like a pretty strong green cast if multiple layers of glass are present in the image. And then we have the option to do this whole thing with the doors closed.
If they wanted the interior with the doors shut.
So,
but if you look at like the bracketing, why am I back there? That's for the doors. Like that's for the outside, right? But the in like I think that's why we didn't use a flash, because like that's plenty bright enough there.
Yeah, and the light is bouncing around in this room enough to fill it out, I think. And it's coming from two sides of the image from this perspective. So it I
mean, I think the only reason you would have used flash, and I'm guessing, is just for like the highlights down in here, this area in here.
Right.
I'm pointing to the chairs.
That's the hard part.
Do we need a third camera or a second camera like pointing at our fingers?
Yeah, maybe we need to do that. Just like
a top down on our fingers. We're just doing like this. What is that for?
I wonder if you can see that little boat out here that was there that day. No, it was. Oh, there it is, right there. This guy had made himself
we had
a
motored
copy
over there
of a boat that I own, and he had made like a smaller copy version. It's pretty cool. That must have been crazy hard to make. But back on subject, and the other thing, do you fluff the corners or do you chop in the middle for pillows?
Right, yeah.
Everyone's different. I kind of prefer chop for some reason. And then, placement of those books, I kind of liked them just being in one place. You could probably spread them all out, make it look a little more luxurious, but, we didn't have a specific soft goods stylist to start putting all these other layers in of textiles or anything else. And then, so with this, we just kind of kept trying to go simple. So
let's just say we didn't shoot lifestyle for this composition, or really much this project at all. It wasn't really a focus.
There's a couple out on the porch.
Let's just say, like, for instance, like you were going to shoot lifestyle in this composition. Where would you put them?
I probably would have put someone either walking down the stairs, walking across the threshold here on right of frame.
That's what I would have done. Yeah. I think like a cup of coffee or something in hand, like just leaning over.
Yeah, like either looking out here, walking up over there, or maybe in this frame just to the left of the chair, blurred, walking out of frame or in. Something like that. But I wouldn't have put anyone
like on the couch looking out, because then you're like, where are they looking? What's out there? Like,
I mean, you could, but then it becomes primarily about the story of that person rather than this space. So it's a really weird balance of where you put lifestyle in an architectural image.
It's just interesting to hear what your thought process is and like how you would think about that.
To me,
space, because it's not obvious, I don't think.
Yeah, to me, it's always it's a side reference of scale mostly. Right. Like you want the viewer to place themselves in the most comfortable and best view that you would get by being in the space. So I would leave all these seating arrangements open and then have people on the periphery somewhere outside of the space. Now, if this were like a commercial office shoot, you'd much more so maybe have people interacting and communicate and doing business things.
Depends what you're trying to communicate. Yeah, and you can communicate a bunch of different things with one image.
Thousands of words, I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go with that. Makes sense.
All right. I think that's pretty much everything with the composition. Up, down, left, right. What do you got in there for styling, and why'd you choose to do what you did? Take it away.
So let's just hop over to Photoshop here. Oop. Yeah, that's the starting layer.
And so it's probably very similar to the first one we were looking at, but you've pulled shadows and highlights.
Pulled shadows and highlights. So you don't need the fill light back here, if that's what we
it's pretty
discussed a little
bit.
Like
it feels a little blown out up here and then outside and then like over in here. But otherwise, I mean,
I think I always start with an image where I'm bringing in highlights, whereas like I don't start with an image where this is all brought in, then I'm bringing in the shadows. It depends, but I think 9 times out of 10, it's the highlights that I'm always bringing in.
The amazing thing about the GFX 100 is that you can pull these shadows and highlights without it falling apart and looking weird. You can pull them a lot further than you could the Canon or anything
especially
else.
The shadows, Right. So, I guess I even brightened it a little further there. I must have thought that was just a little dark back there.
Yeah.
And then...
Yeah, it's starting to balance there.
The highlights are done in stages and not just one
layer. If I were doing this, I'd get there and be like, man, I'm almost there.
So yeah, that's a general highlight adjustment, but then kind of a focus on the
right
from the slatted
right
thing there. You get those are the harsh highlights down there.
Harsh lights.
And then next, I think there's a whole folder of just working on
that looks good.
The exterior.
Bringing that in.
The challenge sometimes with decks like this is they get really hot because when the sun hits them, they're almost like reflective.
Cedar
and so
can
they're
have
very
that,
like hot. They get very hot compared
like
to even like the
silvery
sky.
Reflective.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like sometimes you almost can't even bring them in with like a bracketed layer just because they get so. It's almost like the sun. It's weird. So I think probably a lot of the focus was
That's
that.
nice.
And then making the cutout is probably just cutting out the furniture.
Okay.
See it there. I can go through each one of those if you want.
Yeah.
There's I don't know what I did here. Okay, so that's probably the other image that was bracketed that saying the exterior looks good. Still a little dark. Yeah. And right now I'm leaving this window alone. I think I'll address that later because that's actually brought in right because the double layers of glass. It's really the boat might be a little hot, but it's really just the color that you got to get rid of, and that's just a simple curves adjustment, which is probably right there.
Yeah, and it's always such an interesting thing. Like if you play with this, the things that border it, like this chair, you have to play with the shadows and highlights on that chair to make it speak in relation to these highlights beyond it in the way that it should, and not.
That's the hardest part with like bringing in like a hot area.
Yeah.
Is the outline of like a chair or something like that because like you just said, you get the loss of contrast on the edges of the chair. Right. That if you bring the outside in too crispy, it feels weird. I don't know. I think I addressed that later on, but I think I'm pretty sure your feedback when I had this finished was the chairs need to be darker because they were. I probably didn't address that. I left them kind of hot, but. Okay, so I've got the outside brought in there, and then it's just like the
These
boats
chairs
are catching.
Making me thirsty.
I'm just bringing in the boats are kind of hot.
Water areas.
Working my way from like more of a global like highlight recovery down to like the boats, so like working my way down. The specifics. And then just to brighten the whole thing back up. Right. I sometimes tend to overdo it when I bring the highlights in, like to the point where like that wouldn't look good. But then I think I might have mentioned this in the last one. Bring the curves up to brighten the whole thing up, and then I have full control. If I want to bring it back in, it's just drop the opacity or something.
Would you say you're a contrast and exposure overachiever?
We could say that. Contrast and exposure.
Gotta dial it back, man.
It's easy to. I find that it's so easy to just overdo something, and like almost 9 times out of 10, I'll always drop the opacity by like 40% or 30% of what you think is right.
Right. Yeah. See, that's an interesting thought too. That you can bring it in perfect, like everything's perfectly balanced, and it doesn't look right. Right. Like perfect does not read well.
It's like everything just needs to be brought down because what you think in your mind is right is. Probably just a little over the top, maybe. At least for me.
It's this weird idea of discerning that unmarked line that you cross.
Right. So what's next here? Retouch. Oh, so there's that was the sheeting. I think it's just dialing those highlights down just a bit. I wonder if I can zoom in. There we go. Let's see. Turn that on and off.
Yeah, it looks.
You don't want to take the highlights out completely, but.
It helps.
I wonder if I brought those shadows back in, but
I was like tufted stuff like that. It gives nice shadow lines.
Yeah. Fireplace reflection. See, I think we sheeted that in the other composition, and then I might have just borrowed it for this or something.
I thought we put like a sheet over here because of where we were shooting. We'd been over there, but
maybe.
Regardless,
it's basically black anyways, so it's there's a few little stones in there. But
turn it on and off again. Yeah, it just looks better that way.
Still there. Because you're getting the edge there. I'm pretty sure it was from the other composition because I know we sheeted it off.
It looks great.
At one point. Fit to screen. It doesn't. I'm still getting used to this track.
I think some abstract photography would go really great above that fireplace.
put it in.
As well as that.
Retouching's pretty minimal in this one. I mean,
it's all about
the new home, like some of these, like the newly constructed homes, there's just not blemishes. There's not a ton of light switches. It's very thought out. So it's
there was
not a lot to.
There was one plug over there that I noticed in the raw files that not
so
much.
There isn't really much to see. There's a couple light switches here, but that's it.
Yeah.
What did I do that for? Getting used to this trackpad again.
You're just thickening up the.
Maybe I straightened it out, or no. I think that line of the water there. I think I just brought it out. I don't know.
Oh yeah, no, that's better to not see the water between there. Looks better.
Even though the line, it is on the line, but maybe it should have been further. What's that one doing? Some of these are so small, so subtle. You can't even see. Oh, it's right there's something in there. I think I'm just working. I'm just working on that
tiny
fabric right there.
Tiny.
It's all about the tiny little details that that add up.
The compounding effect of details.
Some of these are so subtle I can't even see them. Okay, that's the couch
layer.
Pulling a little
color warmth out of it. Okay.
I think it's a gray couch, and then color out of the rest of the white interior.
Right.
Because I think you're getting some color cast off the deck and even this carpeting.
Deck carpeting, probably water, a little blue cast.
Bit, yeah.
But it was more of a cream colored interior, right?
Don't know. I think it was white.
White.
This is just bringing the color back into the ottoman there.
Nice.
Because it's got the blue from the sky, I think, on it. So it's just neutralizing that. Probably some vignette kind of from the top.
Little vignette.
Warm up there. Some contrast on the foreground chair.
Oh yeah, look at that.
See that?
Looks better.
I think just at this point, I'm just working my way around the image.
It's so crazy. It's just subtle, very subtle little differences that you can't notice until you notice them, and then when you notice it, you're like, that looks better.
In the last one, instead of just doing the typical vignette in like Lightroom, you can just do it there. You can do just a contrast adjustment here, and you're kind of making a vignette, but just very specific spots.
Right.
And it has the overall effect of the same thing as like a Lightroom vignette, but you're more targeted. What's that doing? It looks like it's outside. Oh, it's inside. I don't know what that's doing. It's hard to see. It's probably yellows. Yep. Pulling some yellows out. Always pulling out yellows. Subtle. It can't even see it really.
It's barely. You can sense it, but you can't put a finger on it.
Then some contrast.
Yeah, contrast vignette-ish. And then a little straightening at the very end.
Just the horizontals. I don't know. Let's see. Take that out of the way there. So that's the finished image.
I like it.
Should we do the horizontal flip and just to check ourselves?
Yeah, flip it like upside down or whatever and see what we see.
So I think that ceiling, now that I'm looking back on this, could probably be pulled down a bit. And it's possible that, oops, I went the wrong way. I want it to go vertical. It's also possible that a lot of times once these are done in Photoshop, we'll adjust them further in Lightroom. So it may be that that was addressed, the brightness on the ceiling or something.
When I flip it like this, when you flip it like that, my attention goes to the ottoman and the deck outside. Which
I think is good because that's I don't know, that's kind of where we're wanting people to look, I think.
Right. I mean, it's bright. This area in here, the windows and the seats, and then it's surrounded by the building and the couch and everything. And
it's not as stark. I guess referencing that last image we did, it seemed a little more obvious, but yeah, we may have cropped this in Lightroom.
Like looking back on this, things I'd change now maybe are a tiny bit I think the shadows in here are good. I think maybe a tiny bit darker shadows on that chair, the far one, and maybe a tiny bit of color taken out of the sunshade. That's about it. The deck outside looks really nice. I like how it's like some of the slats on the deck floor in there are brighter and darker.
Yeah,
and you can read
what it is. It's not uniform.
Yeah, it just reads really
It's just
nice.
On the edge of being like brought in.
Right.
I wonder if that was put in there like that, or if that.
I think it was like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just happened to be awesome. We didn't take out these little lights there. Left them in. Sometimes we take those out. You could put a fire in the fireplace, but that wouldn't read well with open windows and stuff. That'd be a little odd. I'm good with that. That's a pretty straightforward image. A nice thing about post-producing an image like this is the black windows. You don't have that direct light hitting the white windows and have to deal with that blown out area in a high contrast area.
That would have been
to
hard.
Have black windows in a high contrast area between outside and inside. That line is able to be blended way more easily, which is nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if we wanted to close the doors on this. I think that would require like a lot more work to go back in, because then you'd have to bring the outside back in again.
Right.
I think it would, or maybe you could get away with just painting in the.
I think you just close it and you'd
just paint in and leave it like so there's no glass.
Right. Yeah. Just bring in the frames of the doors. So. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
all right. Well, that wraps up another rip roaring, nail biting. Man. Adrenaline overload, man.
I'm kind of sweating a little bit here.
Yeah. Hope you guys are all right.
They're glued to their seats.
Like, is that a sleep glue?
Yeah. Wake up, people.
Continuing education, people. Wake up. Come on. So that's that. And thank you, Elliott Architects, for doing a great project and then trusting us to interpret it to the world.
Yeah.
So next, exterior.
Exterior next. Stay tuned. Thanks.
Stay very tuned. Later.
Stay glued.
Stay glued.